it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhale frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great.
Yes, not cannabis.
Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gangway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer-mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical Russ Belville.
All right, welcome back, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. Radical Russ here in the 4 o'clock hour in beautiful, sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. Looking out at the orange trees, the palm trees, the cacti, and Camelback Mountain. Sure is a beautiful day to be a marijuana law reformer. Glad you could be here with us. And thank you so much for your long-time support of the Russ Belville Show, because I just got the news that we have reached another milestone in this odyssey of mine to talk about marijuana every day. I've been doing this since my 40th birthday. It's really easy to remember. January 31st, 2008, I turned 40, and I took over the reins of the Normal Daily Audio Stash podcast from Chris Goldstein. 2008. Now that I think about it, was it really 8 years ago? Yeah, it was. 8 years ago that I started doing this, and did the Daily Audio Stash, turned it into Normal Show Live, created the Normal Network, which then evolved into 420 Radio, evolved my show into the Russ Belville Show. Now we've spun off 420 Radio as an all-music network, and I'm on exclusively here on CannabisRadio.com. So it's been a long, strange trip, and part of that trip has been getting on Shoutcast and getting online and getting on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn Radio and all of these different outlets. And one of these outlets that's always been flummoxing me is the iHeartRadio, which is huge. iHeartRadio, formerly Clear Channel, is like the biggest media player when it comes to radio these days. And I've never been able to break through and get on iHeartRadio, but I just got the news via chat a couple minutes ago that iHeartRadio has accepted the Russ Belville Show. In fact, it says they've accepted my show and they will be adding it to their index so it will populate and appear in their app over the next 48 hours. So yay, you can get me on iHeartRadio now. Let's see if that'll get me into any of those iHeartRadio festivals one of these days. That'll be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. So we are here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We got some great stories coming up in hour 2 here, and we've also got the phone lines open for your calls at 971-533-7111. We're going to talk a little bit about Judaism in the next segment. We've got a very interesting release from my friends, the Kaufmans in Oregon, who are part of a Jewish-themed cannabis website called Laor, a news organization with a Jewish focus, right? And they've got a cannabis-themed Passover idea that we're going to talk about in the next segment. And I got to give my my disclaimer that when it comes to my knowledge of Jewish tradition and culture, very little. I grew up in Idaho, so there wasn't a whole lot of examples to learn from. So you and I, maybe we'll both learn a little bit in this next segment. Also coming up on hour 2, we've got a small town in Colorado that banned all sorts of pot licensing because, pot's bad and evil and stuff. And now that the economy has turned sour on them, they're having some second thoughts. Maybe that pot stuff ain't so bad if it brings in tax revenue and creates jobs, huh? Also on the show, we are going to talk about another family trying to get medical marijuana who've discovered it's a miracle cure, but it's just too damn expensive for them to be able to use. Why a weed should be too expensive. There's a lot of problems with that, isn't there? Stay tuned. We'll be back right after we pay a few bills here on CannabisRadio.com.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Legal to listen to all over the world. We're just not sure about France. CannabisRadio.com.
With over 6 years of experience in the industry, New Era CPAs is one of the nation's leading cannabis accounting firms, helping hundreds of growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies with their tax, legal, and business strategies. New Era CPAs offices cover the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego, and their skilled team is always available to help you take your business to the next level. Visit NewEraCPAs.com for more info and set up a consultation. Welcome to the New Era.
Chronicling the latest cannabis industry news and headlines.
Well, with 4 states with tax and regulate and the District of Columbia.
The state of cannabis.
Oh my God, it's refreshing. We have people that generally wouldn't speak on behalf of cannabis for fear of retribution, fear of losing your practices, fear of many of those things, and find ourselves in a place that we finally can.
Bringing you fact-based news and views and keeping listeners on the pulse of what's happening in the industry today. The state of cannabis. On demand anytime, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Yar, there be pirates here. Har, 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 har. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. 8 after the hour, and I've got a new report from my friend Roy Kaufman out in Portland, Oregon. It's featured on JewishJournal.com, and the title of the article is "Jewish Group Releases Cannabis-Themed Passover Seder Haggadah." And I hope I got all of the pronunciations correct on that. Let me just read from Roy's post. And by the way I know Roy Kaufman, Roy was the campaign director for the ill-fated Measure 80 in Oregon in 2012, the one that we lost when Colorado and Washington were passing legalization. So Roy and I worked together on some of the political aspects of Measure 80 back in 2012, and it was shortly after that issue failed in the election that Roy got involved with his new group, he and his wife, this new group called L'Or, which is L'Or. And again, it's a Jewish-themed cannabis community. So I would encourage people to check that out. But Roy writes, with the movement to repeal marijuana prohibition spreading across the United States and the Jewish holiday of Passover fast approaching, a husband and wife team in Oregon have produced a cannabis-themed Haggadah to help see this old tradition in a new light. The couple, Roy and Claire Kaufman, are urging Jews all over the world to download the custom Haggadah and host an adults-only cannabis Seder to explore the Jewish spiritual connection to the plant and the need for Jewish engagement in ending the horrific war on drugs and its resulting culture of mass incarceration. Claire Kaufman, the co-founder of the nonprofit Laor, which is Hebrew for to light, says, quote, "We hosted the inaugural Cannabis Seder last year here in Portland. The Seder was such a fun, powerful, and uplifting experience for all of us that we wanted to share it with the community worldwide. The Haggadah creators hope people will download the Haggadah and invite their friends, neighbors, parents, grandparents, and coworkers to a kinder Seder table. The goal of hosting a Cannabis Seder is to provide a familiar and fun venue to have a new, often uncomfortable conversation about marijuana prohibition, race, and justice. Why is Passover a time to tell this story? Because the story of mass incarceration and the oppressions of prohibition parallel the Exodus story. Adam Eidinger of Dr. Bronner's, the event's main sponsor, and also Adam will be a guest on our show next Tuesday to promote the DC Smoke-In that he's organizing. Adam said, quote, "Attending Laor's Cannabis Seder last year, I realized just how far we have come, bringing an amazing life-affirming plant out of the shadows," end quote. He also added, "The Cannabis Seder reminded me that to be free, we've had to struggle." The original Haggadah includes traditional and new songs, suggestions for the host, reflective readings by luminaries like the new Jim Crow author Michelle Alexander, discussion prompts, and riffs on classic Seder elements. The resulting Cannabis Seder is an enlightening experience for the open-minded, the cannabis curious, and the cannabis connoisseur alike. Roy Kaufman says, quote, "By giving everyone the opportunity to experience a Cannabis Seder, we hope to erode the stigma of the drug war that the drug war has given cannabis by making the plant a part of our religious and spiritual practice. We want people to spark up new conversations among Jews, between Jews, and the communities most affected by the scourge of prohibition, namely communities of color. With empathy comes change," end quote. Now you can download this Haggadah at jews-and-weed.myshopify.com. And that's kind of a long address. So on the break, I will get a short link for you on that. That'll be a little easier to find, but we'll provide that in the chat room here in just a second. I'll also tweet it out on my Radical Russ account, so stay tuned for that. And proceeds from the tax-deductible donation go to support Laor's engagement and education efforts. And again, you can get to Laor by going to illuminating.us. If you're interested in Laor, the nonprofit for the Jewish perspective on cannabis legalization and ending prohibition, you can find that at illuminating.us. Fascinating story, and it's interesting to me how different groups and different organizations from different communities are starting to organize around the theme of cannabis. And I'd like to see this extend to other denominations as well. Wouldn't it be nice to see some sort of Catholic cannabis communion? Wouldn't that be fun? Or some sort of a Protestant group to speak out for this, or Islamic groups to speak out for this. It would seem to me that given the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are all based around the same founding concepts and founding texts. And when that Genesis story on the very first page says that the Creator made the herb-bearing seeds to be used as meat, it would seem to me that all three of the world's major religions should have some sort of focus on restoring access to cannabis. Now, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, you know I'm not a religious guy. You know that I'm very secular, very Carl Sagan, scientific skeptic kind of guy. That is not to say that I'm not spiritual, and it's not to say that I discount the spiritual awakenings and understandings that other people have. I just don't see it myself. I always like to consider it like I'm a blind guy. You know, maybe religious people out there just have a sense that I lack, and they're like sighted people trying to explain rainbows to a blind guy. And in my experience, I don't see rainbows. I'm blind to it, right? So this spiritual effect, this Some people in Christianity talk about a relationship with Christ. Other people in Islam talk about submission to Allah. In Judaism, they talk about, getting in touch with the Creator. And good for them, and I'm glad people see that, and I think generally it can be a positive thing. It doesn't seem to happen for me, but I am still fascinated by it. And I'm fascinated by how religion has so demonized this cannabis plant, right? It goes along. I have a secular argument for this too, right? I've told you before about how when I was growing up as a kid, you'd see rap videos on MTV. And I shouldn't say kid, I was in my 20s. But you see rap videos on MTV and they'd blur out the pot leaf. If somebody had a pot leaf medallion or a pot leaf on their hat, right, they'd blur it out. And on that side, on the secular side, and then on the religious side, on either side of this issue, it always seems odd to me that we blur out, that we castigate and cast aspersions upon a symbol of nature. The pot leaf, the cannabis leaf. Now, I understand if MTV wants to ban symbols of rolled joints or smoked bongs or needles or lines of cocaine or anything that indicates drug usage. I can understand the argument behind that. You're putting out videos for kids. You don't want to encourage the usage of drugs. I understand that. From a religious standpoint, I could understand why religions are against processed heroin and cocaine and alcohol and so forth, because mankind has taken some creation and then perverted it for heathenistic needs, for for someone just wanting to get high. I could even see that logic. But for a religion to ban something the Creator made makes no sense whatsoever. It fails internal logical consistency. I am the Lord thy God, and I have created all you can see, and it is all good, except that. Except that pot plant. Oh, don't touch that. And with the MTV analogy, it's like banning the sight of the pot leaf. First of all, nobody smokes the pot leaf. People smoke the pot buds. You might even have a better argument if you're talking about banning the sight of buds, but that argument would fail because we're still allowed to show poppy flowers, aren't we? Nobody freaks out about the display of a coca leaf, do they? No, it's the needle of the heroin that came from the poppy that's a problem. It's the line of the cocaine that came from the coca that's the problem. So that's why I've always found it weird, and it again goes back to that Ehrlichman quote we talked about in the first hour about how the war on drugs, and particularly marijuana, was fostered not because the marijuana was any problem, but because we wanted to control the people that were using it. We wanted to be able to infiltrate them and arrest them and demonize them and undercut their power. That's why that cannabis leaf is so foreboding. That's why these religions have always had a negative perspective on it. Nothing to do with the creation of the leaf itself or what the leaf itself actually is, but more what that leaf has come to stand for. That it came to stand for rebellion and liberalism and pacifism, which, ironically enough, if you study the stories in Christian lore and Jewish lore, Old Testament stories even, talk a lot about rejecting the status quo and rebelling against the establishment and fighting to heal people and to respect and recognize nature. Kind of ironic, isn't it? But we'll keep telling people about this, and we will keep promoting the religious awakening to their own creations. It seems to me that religious people should be the first people in line to end marijuana prohibition. What government has the right to tell us, God's children, that something God created is forbidden to us? It makes no sense from a religious standpoint, and it's time for religious people to start speaking up.
Is it getting chilly in here, or are you wearing an anatomically correct bra?
I don't even know what that means, but happy 420, everyone. It's 420 here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the rest of the Pacific Coast. And it's 420 wherever you are, if you just want it to be. I hope you've got some to enjoy your safety briefing. We'll be right back with more on the Russ Belville Show, Toker Talk Radio, right after this.
Tommy Chong Show on Cannabis Radio. You know, about this podcast, what I really want to do from now on is to solve world problems. I feel like my job is to calm everybody down and focus on how we can save this planet.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
This is the Russ Belville Show, annoying Kevin Sabet since 2012.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor-intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
Being green is good. Growing green is good. Making green is great. CannabisRadio.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
And Blue Blasten Gergen, Pfaffender Blasten, Schnurb Norben. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. 23 after the hour. Hope you had yourself a great safety briefing. I'm going to turn now to a story that I found in the New York Times. And it's another one of those double-edged sword type of stories. On the one hand, but on the other hand, and it's a story about Hotchkiss, Colorado. Hotchkiss, Colorado is a mountain town of coal miners and organic farmers. And when Colorado legalized marijuana in 2012, their local leaders rushed to ban recreational and medical marijuana shops from their town. And this is one of the downsides of legalization is we have these local options that have to be put in the laws or else they won't get passed that allow the more regressive rural communities to ban marijuana licensing. They just didn't want to see any pot shops in their little mining mountain town. But then the economy took a dive. Coal mining especially. One of the mines around the Hotchkiss area was shut down, and there were coal bankruptcies and slowdowns, and another mine that says it's going to go dark. And this is something we've seen in West Virginia and Wyoming and other states as well. Coal is on the way out. And as Hotchkiss is trying to figure out how to keep its economy rolling, just 3 years after legalization, they're asking, what about marijuana? According to Thomas Wills, a town trustee, says, quote, if we could get it legalized right now, we could create some jobs, and we need the tax revenue. Downtown's not going to be all flashing green crosses and dancing marijuana leaves. You can make it as unobtrusive as you want, end quote. Oh, so now that you need some money, the idea of legal marijuana is okay to you. So next month, Hotchkiss is going to vote on whether or not to repeal its ban and to allow marijuana licensees. Cannabis sales are up to about $1 billion in Colorado, and California is looking to legalize. So these towns like Hotchkiss, these little towns, are starting to reconsider whether or not marijuana ought to be legal in their town. Now, one of the things I like to bring up about this, and this is the double-edged sword part, is I do like that these economic pressures are forcing these small towns to reconsider, that they're realizing they can't maintain the high price of their bigotry anymore. That's generally a good thing. And I love this this fella from the town saying they can be as unobtrusive as you want. Right. They always could have been as unobtrusive. Nobody ever said by legalizing marijuana that your town has to have marijuana billboards and flashing green pot leaves and bikini sign twirlers and all of that. Of course, a city can come up with its own regulations, its own zoning, its own ordinances to make the marijuana dispensaries as non-obtrusive as possible. I can't tell you how many stories I've covered where somebody will be complaining about some medical marijuana outlet, say in California, and I'll go to the Google Street View and it'll take me quite a bit of time to figure out which one of those buildings is the dispensary. So many of them are just frosted glass, no signs, no outward appearance type of locations. And it's also always frustrated me as to what terrible outcome these small towns think having a pot shop is going to cause. It's not like we're talking about opening up a tavern where people are going to drive their cars to a parking lot, get out, go into a building, get themselves fucked up, get back into their car in the parking lot and drive away. That never seems to bother anybody. Sure, open up a bar, no big deal. But talk about opening up a pot shop and everybody has these crazy ideas as to some end of civilization extinction level event that's going to occur because you now have a building where adults can go in, purchase marijuana, and walk out. We're not talking about them using it there. We're not talking about them congregating outside and having smoke sessions. It's a building where people go in and go out. That's all. And the only thing that's bothering a lot of these small towns is their own knowledge of what's going on in there. It's not like the kids know what's going on in there or think anything untoward of it or it's going to cause any sort of mayhem. It's just personal discomfort. It's personal bigotry and prejudice against cannabis consumers that has people thinking, "Oh my God, there's a building over there and potheads are getting pot there. Oh no." And again, what's the issue? So as Hotchkiss moves forward on this, let's hope they do move forward on this. Let's hope next month they do vote on this and allow marijuana retailers to come into the city and bring in that tax revenue and bring in that foot traffic and bring up the job numbers and the economy in that town. I'm all for it. But here's the other side of the equation. Here's that double-edged sword I was talking about. Part of why marijuana is seen right now as this huge economic engine is because it's still falsely propped up by the price supports of national prohibition. It's still propped up by the necessary restrictions on cultivation, production, and retailing that having to abide by the Cole memo fosters. What I'm saying here is, yeah, your pot shop looks like a great economic opportunity when the people inside it are selling buds at $10 a gram, when they're selling ounces at $300 an ounce. But those prices aren't going to last. This may be, this period, 2012 to 2016, may be the last period where prohibition profiteering still bolsters the marijuana market. When California comes online, with legal marijuana and we unleash the northern Emerald Triangle areas to grow on a commercial basis, we are going to see such a flooding of the marijuana market. We will have the entire West and Southwest legal. Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, and Nevada, and Colorado. This entire Western region that has already been producing marijuana like crazy when it was illegal. Wait till it's unleashed to produce marijuana legally. And it might take some time to ramp up because the California one has like a 5-year moratorium on the mega grows. So it might take a time to ramp up. But I'm saying by 2020, the idea of a $10 gram is going to be history. By 2020, we're going to see $3 grams, $2.50 a gram. We're going to see ounces at the $50 to $100 level. And while that's good for those of us who are the consumers, for those of us who are pushing to try to get marijuana accepted in some of these rural locations, and we're using the carrot and stick approach, and the carrot is the great amount of money that can be made, what happens to that carrot when it becomes a baby carrot? What happens when suddenly the economic part of it isn't so compelling anymore? What happens when a pot shop is no more profitable or less profitable than a vegetable stand? Does that put the brakes on some of these rural places wanting to accept marijuana? Does that allow them to continue fostering their prejudices and their bigotry? Because now there is no economic incentive to reject it? I've often said that in this green rush, the sooner you legalize, the more you reap. Being the 10th state to legalize marijuana means something. Being the 10th state means that people from the other 40 may come to visit. But if you're the 49th state to legalize marijuana, how much interest is there in visiting you? I mean, think about gambling and how that progressed across the United States. For the longest time, the only places you could gamble in the United States were Nevada and Atlantic City. That was it. There was no lotteries. There was no Indian casinos. There was no video poker lotteries like we have in Oregon. It was all Nevada, Atlantic City. That was it. And both of those areas did quite well, being the only two places in America where you could legally gamble. But then what happened? Well, we got the lottery. We got the statewide lotteries and the Powerball and all of that. We recognized the sovereignty of the Native American tribes to regulate gambling in whatever way they saw fit. Before you knew it, we had not only Native American casinos on reservation land in just about every state, but we also started to see the revival of riverboat gambling, where the states along the Mississippi River allowed for gambling so long as it was on a boat on the Mississippi River. Now, it didn't actually have to be traveling along the river. It could be permanently parked with a dock leading up to it, but as long as it's on the water, it's legal. So since we've had that proliferation of gambling, what's happened to Atlantic City and Nevada? Well, Atlantic City is damn near bankrupt. Atlantic City's gone to hell in a handbasket. It's no longer that special a place when you can go to any number of Indian casinos in Connecticut or New York or any of the surrounding areas. Nevada's done somewhat better, but a lot of that has been through Las Vegas diversifying its appeal to being more than just a Sin City gambling mecca to now being as family-friendly as Times Square. So as gambling progressed across the nation, it became less and less of a draw. It became less and less of an economic engine. And the same thing is going to happen with marijuana. These first 9 states that we'll have legal, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Massachusetts, Maine, those 9, they may be the ones that get the big slice of the pie, and the ones that follow from that point on may be just scrambling to collect some of the crumbs, some of the scraps from the table. So Hotchkiss, you better get on it now. The time is now to get in the marijuana movement, to get that marijuana economy going in your community, to replace the jobs and the tax revenue that you're losing from the decline of coal mining. Because the more states that legalize, the farther along we go in legalization across this country, the less of an economic engine it's going to become as the supply and price of marijuana, the supply goes up and the price continues to decline. We need to be ready for that. We need to be wary about how much we sell the economic side of marijuana legalization, knowing that that economy is going to change drastically once the prohibition price supports crumble. Keep that in mind, folks. We should legalize because it's the right thing to do. We should legalize because prohibition is cruel and unnecessary. Any monetary benefit we get from it, well, that's just icing on the cake, ain't it? All right, we're going to take a break, pay some more bills. When we come back, we go back to the state of New York, where an Albany man could use some medical marijuana but can't afford it. See, that's the other side of that double-edged sword I'm talking about. Be right back in just 2 minutes.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Ganjapreneur.com, your guide to the cannabis business world. Ganjapreneur.com is a comprehensive resource for cannabis professionals and entrepreneurs. Download the Ganjapreneur app on your smartphone or tablet to catch up on cannabis industry news, scroll through our daily job listings, and learn about successful cannabis companies, executives, and investors. Ganjapreneur.com, helping ganjapreneurs grow.
Cannabis use isn't the only thing growing. So are we. Grow with us. CannabisRadio.com.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis business boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis business needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
From high atop Mount Soledad in San Diego, California, 100 feet above sea level. Good morning. It's good news with cannabis nurse Heather.
This plant is amazing. Positive change is happening. We did it. No matter who you are, you can make a positive impact on the world.
I would rather be illegally alive than legally dead.
And that quote helped to give you strength.
Nurse Heather is only on CannabisRadio.com.
Good morning, Cannabis Nurse Heather.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's 38 after the hour, and, you know, we spoke to Joshua Haupt in our first hour, epileptic, who, as a teenager, discovered that cannabis was helpful for him. And we tell many stories like that on the show, and we got another one of these. It's coming to us from NBC10.com, an ABC news station in Albany, New York. And the title of it is, Albany Family Says Medical Marijuana Too Costly for Man Who Needs It Most. And it discusses a local woman who's trying to help her brother. He's been suffering daily seizures for 20 years. Daily seizures for 20 years. He's confined to a wheelchair. Has an extremely rare form of epilepsy. So the family was very excited when New York State approved its medical marijuana law back in 2014. And it doesn't allow access to whole plant medical marijuana, it doesn't allow access to buds, but does allow access to oils that could be very helpful. And in fact, they got him on these treatments, and they found that the oils were very helpful to this man after 20 years of nearly daily seizures. His family writes, quote, Ricky started out as any other normal child. When he was 4 years old, he had his first seizure. Since then, much of his life has been spent in hospitals, doctor's appointments, and medicated to the brink of toxicity. His epilepsy is more severe than most people could ever imagine. It's not uncommon for him to have more than 80 complex seizures in a day. 80. If that's incomprehensible for most to imagine, think of having to endure that for 20 years. 2 decades of not being able to participate in daily activities that many take for granted, such as enjoying a meal with the family or attending a birthday party. By the age of 7, he underwent the first of multiple brain surgeries. The goal was to remove the left half of his brain to stop the seizures. I can't even wrap my head around this. We're going to fix your seizures by taking out half of your brain. That's how far medical science will go to try to help an epileptic before considering giving him pot. That's how dastardly Anslinger's prohibition and propaganda against cannabis has gotten, that doctors would actually consider removing half of your brain, ignorant of the fact that cannabis could probably save all that brain. So he had the surgery. They removed half his brain. They paralyzed him. That procedure, surprising, right? You remove half the guy's brain. They removed the left half of his brain. It paralyzed him on his right side, which, you know how the brain is backwards, right? Left side controls the right side controls the left. You remove the left side of his brain, suddenly he can't use the right side of his body. But that didn't stop the seizures. So now the guy's got half a brain, half a body, and 100% of the seizures. He's tried other surgeries. He tried, according to the family, he also tried the vagus nerve stimulator, as well as special diets and every anticonvulsing medication possible. Not a single one of these treatments significantly reduced his seizures. Ricky is one of the few people in our country with this specific type of epilepsy. He has every type of seizure, ranging from grand mal to small stare-offs. His case is extremely unique. What's left of his brain fires off seizures from multiple areas, making it hard to pinpoint where exactly it's coming from. Ricky's constant seizures are the biggest obstacle he faces in his life. He's not able to go out and do what he enjoys without fear of a seizure. They leave him tired, anxious, aggravated, embarrassed, and unfocused. He has to be under 24-hour care and constant monitoring. After Ricky started medical marijuana oil to manage his seizures, his life changed for the better. He was having significantly less seizures, and their intensity decreased. He was finally able to truly immerse and enjoy doing what he likes without the constant fear of a seizure ruining it. He was less anxious to leave the house and to try new things. He was much more focused and able to retain information like never before. This newfound relief reflected in his personality. He was more positive and relaxed. Ricky was also able to hold conversations without a seizure interrupting his thoughts. The tension in his family's home decreased as well. Family time was spent with more laughs and less worry about the next time a seizure was going to send him to the hospital. Ricky finally had the relief he so badly wanted, and it's been ripped away from him because of money. Because of money. The cost for 1 year of medical marijuana oil treatments in New York State for Ricky is $24,000. Imagine this family. They've for 2 decades dealt with Ricky in his wheelchair, paralyzed on half his side, half his body, has half a brain, has 80 seizures a day. They finally get him some cannabis oil. His life changes for the better. He can communicate. He's present. He's there. He's able to live a life. And then they have to stop because they can't afford it. $2,000 a month. They can't afford it. And now Ricky is slid back to square one. He's back to where he was. He's back to life in his wheelchair, back to 80 seizures a day, back to not being able to live a full and engaging life with the people who love him because it's just too expensive. And we all know why it's too expensive. We all know that in New York State, Their law doesn't allow patients to grow their own cannabis. Their law doesn't allow patients to use cannabis, period. They have to use a processed oil. So New York State has limited it to a few locations that can grow this stuff. 10, I think, 5, some limited number like that. Artificially creating a scarcity of this product. And furthermore, increasing the scarcity by having so few places to buy it and such an arduous process to actually get a hold of it. Here's a family that's doing everything by the book, obeying the law, waiting for New York State to finally pass medical marijuana. And they still can't participate because the price is too high. If New York State had a program where people could grow their own plants, there'd be a line of people ready to grow plants for Ricky. There'd be a line of people ready to grow that weed, process it into oil, and provide it to him at cost. It's not going to happen. $24,000 a year just so this guy can have a life. And of course, it being medical marijuana, why insurance isn't going to pay for that. Gee, if they wanted to spend $50,000 on some of those toxic anticonvulsant medications, I'm sure the insurance would cough up for that. But no, not the one non-toxic, non-psychoactive treatment that actually helps this man with half a brain and half a body. No, we can't cover that. It's an illegal drug. So that's the flip side. That's that double-edged sword I was talking about in that previous story with Hotchkiss, Colorado. And yeah, let's get medical marijuana in here so we can make money, so we can have jobs. But that's all built on the same prohibition price support that makes it so Ricky in Albany has to suffer. That's why I worry about the money aspect of this. That's why I worry when so much of our proselytizing for legalization gets wrapped up around how much tax revenue, and it's the new green rush, and it's the new economy, and yes, it's all that, sure. But if we base our marijuana rights, if we base our marijuana laws on how much money it's going to make for society, how much tax revenue it's going to generate, the sin taxes that might be attached to it, then we provide an incentive to keep those prices high. If the government gets addicted to making 10, 20, 25, 30% tax revenue on a $300 ounce, they're not going to make as much tax revenue if that ounce drops down to $50. We need to be careful that as we're making these laws, we're not creating perverse incentives to maintain the prohibition price supports in the service of making sure our economy is booming and people make money. And in doing so, condemn people like Ricky to a life of suffering that is unnecessary. Now, I think there's a way this can be done. I think there's a way where we can legalize marijuana, and in the legalization of it, consider the plight of the less needy. Consider the most sick and disabled people. I'd be willing to support an additional tax on recreational marijuana that goes into a fund that provides relief, cannabis medicines for the people who desperately need it that are in these financial straits like this. I don't think there's a single recreational smoker out there that would object to such a thing. We are some of the most kind, compassionate, giving people on the planet. And I don't think anybody in this movement that has a soul wants to get rich off of a prohibition price support, knowing that it devastates these families, that these prices are out of control. One of the major reasons why I'm so supportive of medical marijuana and so appreciative of medical marijuana is it breaks us free from that pharmaceutical, medical, industrial complex, that it breaks us free from healthcare in this country being 3 times the cost it is in any other country. It breaks us free from the domination of the big pharmaceutical industries that know they can keep the prices jacked up, the Martin Shkreli's of the world that jack AIDS drugs up to $750 a pill. Medical marijuana is the Protestant Reformation of medicine. Think about that. Back in the day, pre-1600s, Holy Roman Church, Holy Roman Empire, Catholic Church was both church and state. It was the politics of the day. And at the heart of it was this idea that the only way you could gain your salvation from original sin was through Jesus, and the only way you could get to Jesus was through the Pope, and the only way you get through the Pope was through the cardinals, through the bishops, through the father, through the priest. Basically, there's this whole bureaucracy, this whole ecclesiastical bureaucracy you have to go through to get your salvation. And of course, that ecclesiastical bureaucracy led to the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church amassing trillions in fortune. And then a guy named Martin Luther read the Bible and he said, hey, you know what? I've been reading this Bible thing and it says that I don't need this whole ecclesiastical bureaucracy. I can go straight to Jesus himself and get my salvation. That was what the whole Protestant Reformation was. And for 500 years, there have been wars and terrorism fighting over that. Fighting over the idea of breaking the monopoly that the bureaucracy had over our salvation. And again, I'm not a religious person. I'm still speaking in that metaphor, right? And that's what medical marijuana is to the medical industrial complex. It is the Protestant Reformation. It says we don't need the medical bureaucracy of the nurse and the doctor and the hospital and the pharmacist and the drug company and the FDA to get our salvation. We can go straight to the Creator. We can go straight to the plant. We can have our own salvation in our own hands and not have to pay a dime for it if we grow it ourselves. That's why medical marijuana is such a threat to society, at least the establishment.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Educator, author, and advocate Dr. Mitch Earlywine is here to tackle the burning issues.
And I'm here to clear up the myths about cannabis and burn them away with science.
CannabisRadio.com presents a no-holds-barred platform that seeks to redefine and revolutionize the entire scope of the cannabis culture while opening the door for more to join the cannabis crusade.
Dr. Kevin Hill.
You can't ignore the fact that, like alcohol, most people who use don't have a problem. So I think that you need to think about policy in that way while educating people properly about marijuana. I think that's the way to go.
Burning Issues, only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, where we don't change our mind on decriminalization during an election year.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors, and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
We don't limit how much you smoke, and we don't limit where you listen. Cannabis Radio is now on iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio.
With over 6 years of experience in the industry, New Era CPAs is one of the nation's leading cannabis accounting firms, helping hundreds of growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies with their tax, legal, and business strategies. New Era CPAs offices cover the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego, and their skilled team is always available to help you take your business to the next level. Visit neweracpas.com for more info and set up a consultation. Welcome to the New Era.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Closing up shop here at Cannabis Radio headquarters in Scottsdale, but we've got a bunch of great shows coming up over the next few days here on the Russ Belville Show, which, as we mentioned earlier, is now available on iHeartRadio. So excited for that. Coming up on tomorrow's show, Cops Say Legalize Drugs. We've got Lieutenant Tony Ryan, former Denver Police Department. Tell us all about what's happening since we've legalized in Colorado. On Friday, we've got Alec Rockford joining us. He's from the Duby website, D-U-B-Y, which is a new online social media for cannabis consumers. We'll ask him all about that on Friday's show. On Monday, I will be in Las Vegas, Nevada. We'll be bringing you a week of shows from Las Vegas. Starting on Monday with our regular segment, Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. We'll finally get Dr. Mitch back on the line after all my technical difficulties and travel schedule. On Tuesday, Adam Einiger joins us from the DC Cannabis Coalition. He's in charge of that DC Smokeout that'll be happening next Saturday. So on Tuesday, we're going to ask him all about it and how many people he's expecting to show. On Wednesday, we've got another great guest on the show, Doug Fine, for our regular Hemp Day, Hump Day update segment. We'll learn all about industrial hemp throughout the United States. Next Thursday, I will be off because I'll be on a plane flying back from Las Vegas to Portland. And on Friday, April 1st, we'll be back in Portland, Oregon, back at Rolla J Studios. And we've got Matt joining us from MedX. We'll talk all about MedX and their dispensary system. Coming up in the first week of April, more great guests, including Chris Thompson. He'll be joining us next Tuesday from Normal to update us on their membership drive. And of course, we've got all sorts of great events coming up in April. Oh, things get real busy once we start to hit that middle of April. On April 13th, on a Wednesday, I will be at the Moda Center. That's right, the Moda Center in Portland, Oregon, at a pre-party for the 420 Games, which is putting on a special with Cliff Robinson, the former Trailblazer, who has now started his own cannabis line, Uncle Spliffy. We will do our show live from the VIP suite up in the press box area of the Moda Center for the Blazers versus the Nuggets. Blazers versus Nugs. Portland versus Denver. It can't get more weed-friendly than that. So check that out Wednesday the 13th. From the 14th through the 16th, I'll be at the Patients at a Time conference in Baltimore, Maryland. From the 17th and 18th, I'll be at Mark Kleiman's Cannabis Summit in New York City. And the 19th through the 21st, including 420, I'll be at the United Nations General Assembly special session on drugs, bringing you coverage of the international fight to end marijuana prohibition. That's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us. And unfortunately, no live Stoner Jesus, but stay tuned till 6. Top of the next hour, we got the new Tommy Chong podcast coming your way on CannabisRadio.com. For everyone here in Scottsdale, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.